Kind of one of the first ideas that I had was a combination of Instagram and Tinder when they were both out in terms of the platform. And I presented it to somebody and he said, "Why don't you build it?" And I kind of laughed and said, "I don't know how to build that." And he said, you look like you could figure it out. Go home and figure it out." And I did. And I just started looking for information and finding there was this stuff, and I started implementing.
Hey guys, welcome to the Up Next podcast, where we are interviewing teen entrepreneurs that are making it big time in the startup world. We are asking the questions we know you want to hear. Up Next is an app made for teens where anyone can join or build a real life startup.
Okay, so our guest today is Rory Herrmann from Tel Aviv. He is the CEO of both Create and Cryptonomy, as well as a bunch of other apps and platforms that you can find under his name. What Create does, it's actually a digital marketplace for on-demand and personalized content from creators. So thousands of creators have already joined, and more are joining all the time to create a better world of content.
That I've been building since I was a little kid. I've been building technological products, startups, companies, apps, any real thing you can think of. And
how did you find yourself creating such a business? What sparked the idea?
My first business or idea, I think I just started with having an idea in my head and looking into how I can go ahead and turn that business into just from an idea into an actual living, viable reality, a fact. And as somebody who loved computer games and technology and just that whole world of technology as a young kid, I started getting more into the world of code. And effectively what happened is that I had an idea. Kind of one of the first ideas that I had was a combination of Instagram and Tinder when they were both out in terms of the platform. And I presented it to somebody and he said, "Why don't you build it?" And I kind of laughed and said, "I don't know how to build that." And he said, you look like you could figure it out. Go home and figure it out. And I did. And I just started looking for information and finding there was this stuff, and I started implementing it. And what happened is that night, when I really never had any experience with coding or with iOS, I found myself being able to implement kind of like this dragging feature, which was in Tinder. And I like, whoa, this is amazing. I just did this, by myself. And that really, I think, was one of the very pivotal moment in my life where I discovered this world of tech and programming and coding and taking the ideas and being able to actually turn into products through technologies is when it really was one of those bigger moments that started for me.
Who do you consider your first mentor? What did they help you go through?
I'm kind of like a lone wolf in many cases. I like to learn from many people. I've unfortunately never really had a mentor, and I think this is why I wanted to participate in this, because I wanted to give the opportunity that I never really had, from maybe stubbornness or trying to discover things myself. But definitely today I'm working a lot more with people and being able to help them find things and discover things faster. I'm 31, I wish that I was already at 21. I could have discovered a lot of things, but the way I learn is through practice and really through taking a bunch of information and deciding, and that's just kind of my own route. So I didn't really have any per se personal mentors, but I definitely looked as inspiration, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Jackson Pollock from art, and kind of trying to combine a lot of people from different areas who are experts or who are really kind of who changed the game in their specific field, and looking at them and seeing, what did they do? What's different about them? And there's a lot of, I think the similarities between them is that they were all very, very different people. And that's what I try to take. And I try to look at things differently and really take what I can from anybody, anywhere, and improve myself intellectually, spiritually, happiness wise. I think it's super important because it is a journey, like you said.
How much time did it take for you to build the product that you launched?
First product it's super fast. You start simple, you think you have really big visions, and then you build small things. My first app was called Koteret, which is like a title in Hebrew.
Right.
And it was my first app that I built, and I didn't even have a Mac. I had an IBM, like a lot of Israelis do, like this big black computer, and I kind of hacked a way to run Mac on it, and I used ActionScript, whatever, and I built it, and all it did it was one of the first Israeli apps that supported Hebrew, and all it did was take a photo and add a title. Before, like no Instagram, no nothing. It was literally, you could take a photo and add a koteret, add a title, and you had 9 pre-selected titles. And miraculously, it got thousands of downloads because there weren't even any apps in Israel like for Hebrew. There's barely anything. And I think that was the first product that I built. It was super simple. I also had an app called Count I Drank in College, which all it did was count how many beverages you've had, to show around my university to people, like, hey, I built an app and there's photos of 3 different items of drinks and how many of you had. So really, really simple. I think at the beginning you need to find something that you can find as being fun, both as building, but both as once you get to that result, like, whoa, this is cool. I built it really myself. Just when you're getting to just be able to pick up all the skills necessary to actually come out with something bigger.
How much money was needed to build your first version?
So I think this actually would be good to talk about Create TV. And for that, this was this year. This is my most recent and probably my most, the biggest and highest aspirations in terms of what I want to make out of it. And I just, it's been years of working on my craft, of building things. And it kind of it got to a choice. I never wanted to be as an entrepreneur. Somebody had to depend on somebody else to go ahead and create my dreams. And a lot of times in the whole world of fundraising and startups, people feel like, I need to get an investor before I can start doing something. But the reality is that, there's lots of little things or big things that you can prove that take very little resources that are even free, or that you can even generate resources from in terms of proving a concept. And so for me, it was important to prove that I don't need fundraising to go ahead and kind of work on my dream and build this out. But I want to get to a point where I could choose the people that I want to bring on as investors and I could have additional value. And so that's what I did with Create TV. I built a product. I got it to generate traction, to generate customers, to generate revenue. I didn't fundraise from anybody. I didn't pay anybody. I really built it, 100% myself. And I think today, for like any entrepreneur that's watching this, they're in an extremely fortunate position, because today more than ever, it is so much more accessible and easier to take an idea and turn it into reality. It's incredible. I mean, there's so many, especially today, there's so much opportunity wherever you look, and you have actual ways of doing it. So unfortunately, I was growing up, building an app was expensive. Like, you had to find the people to do it and pay them lots of money. Today, that is the case in some situations, but the reality is that you can build it, or a basic version of it. Web has become very strong. So barrier to technology is constantly decreasing. And as an entrepreneur as well, there's so much more you could do. And that's where kind of the ideas and the hard work of making it happen, because it's possible, but you need to work hard, and that's what ends up with the results eventually.
How did you get those first users, customers to come aboard? What was that like?
I think one of my benefits, and also one of my kind of the gifts and the curse, is I love building. I love creating things. And a lot of times I try to create too much and prove too much before kind of doing these little steps. So for me, it started with just calling people and stopping people, and just to kind of sync up. So, Create TV, it's a digital marketplace for creators to go home to offer digital services, products, experiences to people, and in return also get something. So this whole idea of the creator economy and monetization. And it started though with personalized videos inspired by Cameo, which I saw in the United States around 1.5 years ago here. And it was just convincing people, selling them on the vision, telling them what you believe and why they have a good opportunity to come in and join now, FOMO or whatever it is. But I think the general concept is you need to give people value. You need to give them value when you're starting, and that's how it works. You can't expect them to, you need to prove yourself. I always say, I'll prove it on, like the proof not is in the pudding, but it's on me. I'll prove it to you. Kind of a numbers game. If you talk to 10,000 people, like statistically, people will answer. The higher the value, the higher your value offering, the less amount of people you need to talk to get that. And then after hearing hundreds of no's, and kept on building and adding things and taking the feedback, then I started getting a few more maybes, and then it started getting into yeses. Then eventually you proved yourself, because you proved to 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, and more people come. And it's a process, and this single moment can be kind of spanned up to 10 years just talking to people, you know, for that to happen, to get to the point where you're able to quickly iterate. But that's just how I did it. I talked to people, got feedback, gave them a product just because I was able to, and then iterated, saw what worked, saw less. It's a combination of art and science. I think in the beginning, especially because you don't necessarily have lots of science to back up on your product, you're just looking at other things. But eventually it becomes, you know, there's always that game of science and art. Sometimes you need to invest way more in optimizing and looking at the raw numbers and the raw data. And sometimes you need to look very far from the data into something that nobody's potentially looking at. And that's, I think, how you can differentiate yourself. And it's a combination, and that's what's amazing about it. There's no formula. I was never somebody to go in and stop somebody in the street and talk to them and tell them something. I even worked at a mall in California right after the army, trying to sell people all this, you know, Dead Sea salt materials. And I felt like very uncomfortable. And just in general, I'm usually kind of shy in public, but you know, when you feel like you're so dedicated, you've got conviction and you believe in something because you've spent time to think about this through, and you're willing to put in the effort, then, you know, I love talking about what I do because I really feel like I'm doing something important. And I think it's important, not just for me, for the world and for the people involved. And it becomes so much easier to talk about it because you're not convincing anything. And I've had many instances where I've been next to people that could have been strategically very valuable to the platform. But even there, you know, I know that what I'm doing is there's like, eventually it will prove itself. And I'd rather not sacrifice perhaps a friendship or opportunity for that, because in the long run, it will prove itself and the value will come out and you could be a part of it. But if not, hey, there's tons of other people that are just as willing or more than willing, interested to be a part of it. And it's your loss at the end of the day.
What is the next goal for you looking forward?
I think, you know, both on a company and personal level, I like to set goals extremely high. And I want to build a company that's going to change the world. It's going to make the world a better place. And then I'll know that, you know, when the day comes that I know that I helped make the world a better place. And I think technology is, you know, it's just as natural as anything else. We built it, we created it. It's part of the process that we're going and to make people's lives better. And I think there's so many good ways you could use technology. And, you know, I'm focused on using technology, combining it with culture and creativity and making it adaptable and accessible to everybody. And eventually creating making it easy for people to create, consume value through content, through digital information, versus strictly using it as a means for connectivity or exposure, which I think that's kind of been the last 10 years, the last 20 years, that's been a lot of where technology has been going. And now the world's almost too connected. And we need to figure out how to use it to really distribute more value for one another. And there's tons of exciting things that we're working on here that, you know, I go to sleep late and wake up early just so I can get more time to go and work on these things. Because I think as an entrepreneur, there's one thing that you don't have, and it's time.
What is one time you experienced a real fail moment? Just, you know, everything went wrong. Did you fix it? Were you able to? Did you learn from it? What happened?
So I think I'm somebody who's failed a lot and continues to fail a lot. Whether it's if I've built 50 apps and I'm still not a notable person who's accomplished notable things in the world of tech. To smaller failures where, you know, you don't get a deal that you want or a hire that you want, or the product doesn't launch as you want. So one, I think that there's tons of failures. You need to get used to it if you want to be an entrepreneur. I feel like you can't succeed without failure. So it's definitely something that you need to look at. And I think one thing one sentence that I've always taken with me is that every success is one success less towards failure. That's how I looked at it. Every failure, great. That's one more failure less towards I get to that moment where it succeeds. You know, there's that sentence, like there's, I forgot who it was, but about finding solutions and failing to get to those solutions. It might've been Thomas Edison, but that's how I look at failure. I love failure because I know that's the way I look at it. That means that there's one less failures towards me getting it correct and getting it right. There's periods where you're going to get a lot of things working for you, and then there's always going to be periods where it goes down. And that's the other thing, because I know that it's kind of wave, and that's why I also don't like to, you know, be too emotional or exaggerate about when things don't go right. That's part of an entrepreneur. That's part of being successful, I think, personally, for me. And then also what helps you going forward, because if you know that you will fail at some point from different things, it's just, it'll be much easier to handle it. It's kind of like on a jet ski and, not seeing, not being in the backseat of a jet ski, you can't really see what's going on. And when there's a wave, you're ready for it, then it's much harder than the person that's anticipating it and ready for it and ready to take it on.
What are 3 traits that you look for in a co-founder, business partner type of person?
So definitely the co-founder, somebody that you want to, be, I'll jump in. Conviction. You got to see they have the fire, that they're willing to really put themselves for the greater cause. Definitely is somebody that you kind of want to, that you see them as a co-founder. I make sure that they actually, can back up things that they say. So a lot of times people come up and they say all these things, but there's a very big difference than what people say and what people do. I like people that are executors, that are talk less and do more. And sometimes, you want people that talk more and do less, but I'm kind of a, I like builders. I like people that you can see results and that you can see the value behind what they say. And I think third is just somebody that, it's kind of this intangible trait, but people that you can feel like you resonate with, that have a good heart, that want to do good, and that you can relate with, and that you'd have fun just working with it. You get excited with because get this, as somebody who doesn't have really a co-founder and has tried several times. I've just never been able to find anybody as dedicated to me, to the cause, and willing to work as hard, and that also had the capacity of doing certain things and backing it up. And maybe it's because I have unrealistic expectations. Maybe it's because of me personally. I also think, and I've heard this more and more recently, because maybe there's been this kind of convention of you have to have 2 or 3 co-founders for a startup. But I feel like really recently, maybe the last year or 2, you're starting to see it become more and more acceptable to have a solo founder startups, because again, it's getting more accessible to do more things and the reality is that the world is fast, and if you can't make fast decisions because you've got to constantly discuss things over, then that's very, very costly. And I think for us, the ability to move fast is super important. But it just depends. If you have the skill set, if you have the capacity, look into it. But I'll just add a note. It's hard, when you're not discussing all those decisions, you also have 100% of the responsibility and everything. And like I said, there's ups and downs. There's these moments where you're on top of the world because you're about to close something big, and there's moments where it all shatters and it's all on you. So you also need to look into that, and it's definitely not for everybody. But if you want it, the juice is worth the squeeze. Like in this case, I think for me personally, definitely, and for other entrepreneurs that I've spoken with.
Could you name one advantage and one disadvantage of being such a young entrepreneur?
So I think for me, I think an entrepreneur lots of times needs to know how to do a lot of things. And this is something that I've seen since a young kid. I got bored very easily with things. I joined this club and the architecture club, and then after like a week, I'd leave it. And so I was never this type of kid that would stick to one thing and like be, and be the best at it. And that's something I constantly revisit in my life. Like I remember also picking up, like, I'm not exceptional at anything. I'm above average in many things. That's how I always looked at it. And today, I think that disadvantage perhaps is something that's an advantage, because you don't need to become domain experts in one. Like you can become a domain expert in one thing. That's an option. But today, you actually have the ability of picking up things quickly. And if you're able to quickly learn how certain tools, technologies work, that's a huge advantage. And I'm seeing it today. And I hope I will see it also in the future. And I definitely am bullish on this, because I think it's going to get easier and easier to do things. And if you don't have a wide angle of certain things and how they work together, it's going to be hard for you to move fast, because it's going to take you a long time and things are not going to necessarily work. So it was definitely something that I could have viewed as a disadvantage of maybe, not having one domain and looking into that and spending all of my time in that. In reality, I am doing that because I'm spending on time and technology, but I'm not, I was never into one specific vertical or one specific field. I love everything. I love creativity. I love technology. I love there's infinitely endless things to do with it. And I think, yeah, as an entrepreneur, you know, you need to look at your disadvantages and you need to own that. You need to look at them as advantages and see. And that's also another thing about entrepreneurship. You need to find solutions to seemingly hard or problems. That's what you do. That's what you live for challenges, for finding what's wrong and figuring out how to fix it. And that's what it is. You need to look at the screw that doesn't look like it fits, and it might actually go there, and it'll look and work a lot better. And so for entrepreneurs, every disadvantage is a potential advantage. I feel like you need to just figure out how to put the puzzle in the right place.
What is a tech tool that you just can't go without? Maybe an app or a website, something that you always use?
There's a lot, but I like to just kind of revisit the ABC thing because I think it's important that quote or whatever is. I was at Columbia when I was studying there, and there was somebody who created a code academy, ABC, and I kind of looked at it funny because at that time I wasn't even really a coder, and I still don't necessarily look myself as a coder. And but I'll jump into that. He said ABC, always be coding, and it looked funny to me at the time, but it's something, you know, it's kind of like always be creating is maybe how I can kind of take that into my own world. And I think it's just the same thing of kind of like perfecting it through the craft and practicing, and that talent versus skill. I don't see myself as a exceptionally good computer scientist. I think I'm really, really, you know, bad. But I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to learn it, and I think I have creativity that maybe others might lack. And so that idea of always be creating, always be taking your ideas and trying to make it into something that people can get value from, whether it's a drawing, whether it's a product, whether it's a business, you know. And the more you do, I mean, that's just statistically, the better you'll get at it and the higher chances you have of succeeding. It all comes down eventually to that. And so that's kind of my mindset of ABC. And the reason I like coding is because until pretty recently, you know, that used to be kind of your main way of creating digital scalable things versus taking a hammer. But today, you know, there's tons of stuff that I do without coding, and it goes anywhere from design to automating of tasks where there's zero code involved, and I think it's great for people to be exposed to that. What I can't go without. There's so many, you probably don't even want to see like my doc. I'll go. Miro is definitely one of the ones I'd like to recommend this year. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's like this digital whiteboard, and it's a great place. They have tons of stuff. And that's just another trend that I think is important for entrepreneurs just in general. To like today, technology is becoming super decentralized. It means that it's very, very easy to integrate, you know, groundbreaking technologies into your platform, into your workflow, or whatever it is, versus, you know, having it as a closed gate where you need to pay a bunch of money or talk to a bunch of people to get things. That's pretty much the main ones, but I also highly recommend visiting TechCrunch every single day, visiting Product Hunt every single day, and just getting inspired by new stuff that people are working on. And this just has constantly surprised me because I'm using and learning about like groundbreaking technologies, in my opinion, that other CTOs, CEOs, companies, you know, senior engineering people and very big companies, I'm still able to get that, you know, information is power, knowledge is power. And I think that is a good way that curates technological companies or cool products. And you could see somebody building something on Product Hunt. And it doesn't mean you have to do the same thing, but what did they use to build that? Oh, great, I could use that tool to build something else. So just like they have a brush and they created something, you can create something completely different with those same tools. And it's just a great place for inspiration, in my opinion, and just keeping up the trends.
Which entrepreneurs inspire you the most these days? Who do you have your eye on?
So for me, it was actually, it's a combination of Steve Jobs and Jackson Pollock, who's an artist, and he kind of brought painting to the West in terms of Western art, and kind of took the canvas and moved it from the East to the floor and reimagined that kind of how you should even look at painting. And I don't have one person. I like to take little things from each person and combine my own, you know, original kind of. I definitely think like that's one of my visions and my angles is I like combining creativity with technology and like that artistic sense, which part of what we're doing in Create TV is looking at people that have tons of value to give to the world, and they just are not they have no idea how to use or leverage technology to scale and provide to people. And it makes sense because they've been spending their whole life working on this, and there's the technology that's been constantly growing, and they just haven't had the time. And so that's where I want to come in. We want to come in and say, hey, we'll build you something that will just help you completely unleash your value, unleash your creativity. We're going to do it using technology because that's the power of technology. It can scale, it can grow, there's just so many amazing things about it. So yeah, that's why I bring it in. It's an important, or we're called Create TV, like create, that's kind of one of the core values that we have, and it's not a coincidence at all.
Which trait of yours do you feel is your weakest and you need to outsource it somehow with a coworker or maybe a tech platform?
I hate bureaucracy. I would say it can move the needle in many ways, and I think bureaucracy is something that usually, like, these kind of busy tasks that need to be done in terms of like regulation and like in the longer process. But I don't like things that it might take a really long time, like, for you to see results, if that makes sense. I think one of the great things about technology and building stuff is you can put it out, get a user, see there's quick iteration, which means there's high friction, which means there's quicker iteration. And bureaucracy just doesn't really have that. You could prepare a paper for a week and get a response in 2 months, and like what happens in between that. So it's stuff that I'm not as good at that. You need to fill in things like exactly how people want it. That's not the kind of person that I am. I'd probably do it like all different, not how anybody wants it. And that's, somebody who likes those kind of processes, who works with them, who understands them, would definitely be somebody who would be a strong, that would help kind of supply the stuff that I'm weaker at or that I have less passion. Generally, I think things that you have less passion in the long, you won't be as good as them because you won't just spend as much time on improving them.
What single piece of advice do you have to give to those who are listening and looking to be in your place?
Get ready to spend 10,000 hours. You'll have to spend at least 10,000 hours, just have that magic. There's a magic number there. We all have a different magic number, and it depends on how much time you spend and how much effort, but there's a magic number there and you don't know what it is. So, but just know that every second, hour you spend, that number is decreasing, getting smaller and smaller. And one day, if you spend enough time, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's what you also kind of need to think. And so once you have that mindset, I think that have a vision, have a clear kind of end of the tunnel you're never going to really be able to reach, but you'll be able to get closer and see that you're getting closer. And at the same time, make sure that you're enjoying what you're doing every single day. And I think if you can find both of those, the start and the end of the journey, then the journey itself is so fun. It's so exciting, but it's hard. It takes a lot of playing around and figuring and iterating on yourself on what you like to do to find what you enjoy waking up for early in the morning, and also kind of what you dream on at night.
How important do you feel it is for young entrepreneurs to think about social change when creating a business?
It's very, very important. And I think it's also not very important. This is why. I think in order to get to a point where you can potentially, make products, platforms, businesses that can really I'm talking about real social change, you'll probably need to pick up a lot of earlier kind of skills and knowledge and information and experience, because then it might just stay as a big idea that never really turned into something real. So I think you need to think about it, but you should also do things that you can just, that can help you develop yourself, and, that you can get quicker feedback on to improve yourself. Because if you're working on something like so big, then you might not even be able to learn anything from failing it. But if you kind of work on try to solve smaller problems, try to work on a bit smaller tasks that have quicker friction, higher friction and quicker iteration, then I think, it'll help you get to that point, and you'll actually have an idea of how you could turn this idea into reality. And I can tell you on a personal level, one of the platforms I worked in the beginning, I definitely saw the vision. I always thought, how can this world, even if it was a DJing app, I would literally I would feel it. And I don't know why, but I would just always try to think, how is this thing going to change the world? And obviously it would take a lot of time to get there, I always thought about it, but I never, I definitely started moving on to other things before that job was done. So I think it's super important. And I think there's a way to turn any idea or product into something that can have a good impact for society, anything really. If it means taking the part of the revenue and spending it on something that does good, to having something much more core in terms of the functionality and the propositions of your business. But I would just start with try to find things that you would enjoy and that you believe would give value to the people, other people in the world, and it starts giving value to more people, 10 people, 50 people, 1,000, and hopefully the whole world.
If you could have any superpower in the world, what would you pick?
My previous answer was time, but I think that something involving with thought, the ability to maybe multiply your thought or answer, be like super smart. I would definitely think if there was like a feature about me I wish that I could have, as being a superhero, is having a really big brain. Because I think that's where it's all going to, like, invest in your brain. I say invest in your brain, not your face, not your body. Invest in your brain and your heart. I think these are assets that have a much higher value return for you and for other people. They stay longer. Like the older you are, you kind of the smarter you usually get versus how your physical senses. So I just think in terms of like general investment, it makes much more sense. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'd have a super brain, and I'd have a ton of time, infinite amount of time, not infinite, but a lot of time. Yeah. Thank you guys. Happy to be here. Happy to help, and hope to talk soon.